Well, thank you. I will be as brief as possible so we can get to the main attraction of the evening. Let me just elaborate a little bit on the numismatic resources that are being developed currently here in the library. As we just heard, and probably most all of you already know, we were able to acquire what is arguably, certainly I think, the largest research library for ancient numismatics this side of the Mississippi, I think it's fair to say. Almost 3,000 titles, thanks to the generosity of some of the donors who are here today. Everything has been cataloged, placed in the Raubitschek room, which is the classic study room here in Green on the 3rd floor. It was used by Professor Wojtek, who came in as a visiting professor in the spring quarter to teach those two courses. And it's true, the students did petition. And I've been in this department for a long time. We've never received any petitions. Maybe there are petitions to get rid of some people, but never been a petition to have more courses in a certain field. So that's obviously very promising and something that could not have happened had we not acquired this particular resource. Now, one of the two courses that Professor Wojtek taught involved the students going to the Cantor Center, the campus museum, to work with their ancient coins. It turns out they hold thousands of ancient coins, which are somewhere down there. And now we have thousands of books about ancient coins, which are somewhere over there, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because in order to really use this in a fruitful fashion, you have to be able to do it side by side. And it's especially important in teaching students, right? They have to be able to handle the original coins and then refer to the corpora, all the specialized literature in order to figure out which coins are these and so on. And that's very difficult to do if you have to drag either the books or the coins back and forth. So I'm told there is now, I'm not allowed to say an agreement, but a conversation about moving those coins from Cantor to the library, which would be a really amazing thing to happen, because that would really turn us into one of the major centers for research and teaching in the field of ancient numismatics. And it would be a great boost to what we can do in the future in terms of teaching our students, introducing them to this material. We're already planning a new event, which will happen, I believe, hopefully in this room in the first week of May, where we'll bring back Professor Wojtek. We'll have colleagues from the Getty Center, we hope, in LA, from the American Numismatic Society in New York. There will be presentations, as there were at a previous event this May, by in part the local experts, the collector and donor community, and just to keep our momentum. And I'm sure that over time, once the coins have been moved, once we are able to make full use of these new resources, we face a very bright future. We also face a very bright future over the next 45 minutes or so, because we have the very special pleasure, of course, of welcoming our speaker tonight, Don Everhart, who is now the lead engraver, modeler, sculptor at the US Mint in Philadelphia. Here he looks back at a very long and distinguished career. He started out working at the Franklin Mint, which is a private institution, then worked freelance, and for the last 12 years has been, as I said, at the US Mint. Now, it is, I think, quite literally impossible to even count the number of designs and models he has created or has been involved in. And it's impossible for me to pick more than just a very few highlights, because even his published credits go on and on and on, and I'm sure there are lots of unpublished ones. He has designed the reverse designs for 3 of the US statehood quarters for the states of Hawaii, Nevada, and New Mexico. And he has modeled 3 others, most importantly for us, the quarter for the state of California, alongside those for Idaho and Montana. So there's a Western theme, I guess, in this. And if you carry coins in your pocket, there is a good chance that one or more actually bear a design made by our speaker today. Don has also designed and modeled for the US presidential dollar series and for the presidential spouses series as well. His designs feature a number of famous former US presidents, James Madison, Abraham Lincoln, Wilson, Truman, JFK. I think Richard Nixon was the most recent one just this year. So nobody gets left out. They all get their own presidential dollars. He has also done a number of commemorative silver dollars. Probably one of his biggest, some of the biggest recognition he received was when President Clinton selected his design for the inaugural medal for the second term of President Clinton in '97 to be on his medal. So Clinton must have really liked what you did. I guess it made him look really presidential. Donald has also helped create a very large and rapidly growing number of Congressional Gold medals, which are also produced by the US Mint, including one for the Dalai Lama, and increasingly, I think, for veterans and constituencies in that sector. He has produced many issues for the Society of Medalists. When he was still doing freelance work, I'm not sure if you still do that on the side, if they let you, okay. He worked for a number of corporations, Walt Disney, Tiffany, producing figurines. He has produced artwork, quite substantial in some cases, for academic institutions, and he has done contract work for the mints, the governments of foreign countries, including the United Kingdom. And in addition to all of this, I just learned he also produced a series of animal-themed or even animal-shaped medals. And I urge you to look them up online because the designs are really absolutely striking. I love the chameleon medal, which is a curled-up chameleon, which looks absolutely amazing. I'd really like to have. I'm not sure if they're on the market. I'm in the market for one of those. So unsurprisingly, given this very long list of accomplishments, he has received a number of awards and a great deal of recognition. And it's therefore a genuine pleasure and honor for us to welcome you here tonight. And I, for one, am really looking forward to learning more about the inner workings of the Mint and how this is actually done. So please join me in welcoming Don Everhart.
Thank you for that very special introduction, Professor Scheidel. You've obviously done your homework. I'm very honored to be here tonight. I want to thank Gabrielle Karampoulos. I want to thank Mary Lannon. She's chairperson of this CCAC. And also we have another CCAC member here today. That's Heidi Wastweet. The CCAC is the Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee. And I'll talk more about that later as I get into it. But I started out, let me go back to when I graduated from college, high school actually. I got my best grades in spelling and art. And there weren't a lot of jobs in spelling at the time, so I decided that, art was probably what I was going to be doing. So, just briefly, one day can change your whole life. I didn't realize it at the time, but I used to work at this ticket and label company up in Northeast Philadelphia. And I was just doing mechanicals, layouts, working with type, and making little pre-photographic label artwork. And it wasn't really what I wanted to do, so one day I played hooky and I went down to South Street looking for a one-man show, and I went into a gallery down there. I took my portfolio in, and the gallery owner said, well, we don't really have any openings right now for a show, but I work at this place called the Franklin Mint out in Delaware County, and we have an opening for a paste-up artist. So I'm still doing paste-up, but I'm getting out of the city, and I made $1,000 more a year, which was quite a bit of money back in those days for me. So I went down to the Mint, and I got interviewed. They hired me. I worked there for a year, and then the same old demon came up and said, this is not what you want to do. You want to do something that's really, more art-oriented. So while you're here, why don't you try out this sculpting thing? Because at lunchtime, I would go around and visit with the sculptors at the time and see what they were doing. And I thought, if they can do it, I can do it. So I got a couple tryout pieces, and on the third one, they hired me. So that day that I went down to the gallery, I didn't know it, but that set me on a career of making coins and medals, and I never anticipated that before. I never even gave it much thought at all. I thought that I would be an illustrator and be doing album covers and things like that, but it didn't work out that way. So I worked at the Franklin Mint for 6 years. I left in 1980, and I freelanced for 24 years. And you've heard some of the things that Professor Scheidel said that I had done. I did little things like a Mickey Mouse zipper pull that was on a kid's jacket. And anything from that up to over life-size figures in bronze that are standing in front of some institutions. 24 bronze sculptures of sporting events for Georgetown University. So I did a lot of work in those 24 years. And then around it was around 2004, I always figured I'd wind up at the United States Mint somehow, but I did. And I took the job in 2004, and I worked there for a year trying to get a design selected, and nothing seemed to work. And then one day, they picked my Nevada design for the state quarter. So I was really excited about that. I was really thrilled. And one day I went out to lunch, and I got the quarterback in change. And, and I said to the guy, you know, I did this. I sculpted this. He said, sure you did. You know. So I've never done that again. I've never told anybody. So let me get started here. When we have a design to work on, before that even comes to pass, we have, Congress has to legislate it. We don't do anything unless Congress passes the law and the president signs it into law. And then we're given verbal narratives. And I don't know if you can see it too well, but this is called a Wacom Tablet that I'm working on here. You can actually draw on it. It's regular computer monitor, but I use Photoshop and Illustrator, and I'm able to do my designs on there. And you can't see it too well, but what I'm working on is the reverse of the Brumidi Congressional Gold Medal. It's the apotheosis of George Washington. It's on the Capitol Rotunda. If you're ever down there and you look up, that's what you'll see. So we got the design. It's not showing up too well here. I don't know if we can adjust this lighting on the computer at all, because we're losing a lot of detail, but anyway. I did that design. I liked it, but I had another one that I liked better, which wasn't chosen. It's a shame you can't see it too well, but can you see it? I can't. But that one didn't get picked. But you know, a lot of my best designs have wound up in the trash can for some reason or another. So this was the clay model that I proceeded to sculpt after I got the design selected. And this took quite a while. There's a lot of work in this. You have to copy the artwork really closely, which I had a lot of experience at the Franklin Mint, because we used to do series of modern masterpieces and artwork from the past, Goya, Raphael, those kind of things. We had to duplicate paintings, only do them in relief sculpture. So I had a lot of experience getting everything to look as it does originally in the paintings. So I took that as far as I could in the clay, and then I cast it. And this is a procedure that I use when I'm casting. I'll take and I'll band up the plaster. This isn't the same plaster, obviously. This is a freelance job that I did, but it's the same idea. I put a band around it. I roll up some clay. I put the clay around the edge so that it doesn't leak, and trim it off with a popsicle stick. It works. And then I put soap on it, and I rub that in, and it works as a separating agent, so that when I pour the negative plaster on top of that, and it sets up, I'm able to open it up. So you wait about 35 minutes, you go out and, this is leveling the plaster. Wait about 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I missed this step here. You got to add the plaster to the water first, and mix it up well. I like to do it with my hand because I can feel if there's any lumps in the plaster. And paint it on, because that way you can get into the little recesses in the relief, and hopefully you won't have air bubbles. Sometimes, no matter what you do, you get thousands of air bubbles. I've never figured out why, but it happens every now and then. So I wait about 45 minutes. I go out and take a bike ride. I come back and put the razor blades in the edges, and I separate it. And I don't have a copy of the plaster itself, but this is how the metal turned out. I don't know if you've seen the little, I don't know if Gabrielle, have you handed out those yet? Okay, so yeah, this is the 3-inch version. It's a replica of the actual Congressional Gold Medal that was, well, I can't say it was given to him because he's deceased, but we did have a ceremony down in Washington. And John Boehner was there, and he did cry at this reception. So this was the obverse, my design also. And that was how the medal turned out. I also did a gold medal for Michael DeBakey. This is the drawing for it. And that's the clay. You'll notice that I didn't put the glasses on in the clay, because what I'll do is when I cast this into a negative, I'll put them in the negative backwards, and everything that I cut into the negative will be raised in the positive. It's a lot quicker and a lot cleaner to do it that way. And we don't have to do lettering anymore. I learned how to do lettering when I worked at the Franklin Mint. We would actually cut it into the negative backwards. And it sounds really difficult, but after a while you get the hang of it. But it's a lot easier now because we have the lettering done digitally, and it frees me up to do the fun stuff. So that's how the medal turned out. This was for the Women Air Force Service pilots, the Wasps. They were pilots in World War II, and I'm showing the 4 planes that they flew during the war. The top plane is a Grumman Avenger, the middle one is a P-51, and the one on the bottom is a Martin Marauder. That's the design. And that's the finished plaster. If you notice closely, there's a stippled effect in the background. And I did that with a pointed tool, and it was like for 6 hours I was doing this in my office. And my secretary was like thinking that there was a woodpecker or something in the building. I think I drove her crazy that day. And that's how the final medal turned out. I really like sculpting planes, and I got the reverse of the fighter aces. 5 stars indicates how many kills you have to be a fighter ace. And we've represented 4 different wars where the fighter aces were flying and shooting down other planes. The top one is from World War I. It's a SPAD. The second one down is a P-51 from World War II. The third one is a F-86 Saberjet from Korea, the Korean War. And the Vietnam War is represented by an F-4 Phantom at the bottom. I really enjoy doing planes. I did a whole series of planes for a company in Wyoming. It was 24 planes. They were all World War II aircraft. And I really, at the time when I got the commission, I thought, yeah, okay, planes, I'll do them. But I really got interested in them when I did these. And we were actually illustrating specific missions with specific planes with specific serial numbers and pilots. So it was a pretty specific program. The Dalai Lama. I got the obverse for that one. We gave it to him in 2006. I used Jim Lickeritz's hands because I couldn't get the Dalai Lama to pose for me. And this is how the Mint photographed it, which I never really was able to come enjoy because it should be lit from the top. But anyway, so I did my own photograph, which is marginally better. But anyway, we got to meet him. He gave me a prayer shawl, and there were about 4 or 5 of us sitting with the Dalai Lama at his hotel suite in Washington before he was given the medal at a ceremony. And we were chatting with him, and I said, Your Holiness, I was really impressed by the feeling of serenity I got from looking at your photographs. And he leans in, he looks at me, and he says, Did you give me hair? Seriously. So I assured him that I did give him hair, and I spent the next couple of minutes talking to the Dalai Lama about male pattern baldness. This one was done for Norman Borlaug, and he was a geneticist and botanist, and actually learned how to increase crop yields in countries such as Mexico, Pakistan, and India. When he first started working with India, they were starving, and in 5 years they were exporting wheat. So if anyone deserves one, he certainly did. He was the father of the Green Revolution, and I actually met him down there, and he reminded me of my grandfather for some reason. Real nice guy. This one, I was talking to Heidi and Mary about this before my talk tonight, and I was trying to figure out how to design a medal for Byron Nelson, the golfer. And I wasn't coming up with anything. So I went home, I was in the shower, and all of a sudden this design comes to me in my head, you know, of all places. I mean, in my head, not the shower, but anyway. So I went in the next day, I did a thumbnail sketch, and I developed it, and it got picked. So I wish they were all that easy, but unfortunately, they're not. I've done a number of golfers. I've also done Arnold Palmer, and Jack Nicklaus. We gave him the medal. Nicklaus was given his medal a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, I think it was. This is the Nevada quarter, the notorious quarter that I got in change. This won Coin of the Year back in 2008 for, there are several categories. This won in both most popular and best trade. I think they have about 10 different categories, and it's an international competition. They give out the awards in Berlin, usually I think it's in February. So I was quite honored. It's the first one I had chosen. I still think it's one of my absolute favorites. And I did the final coin of the Q50 series, which was Hawaii. And the first one of the America the Beautiful quarter series was Arkansas Hot Springs. And I also did Great Sand Dunes. Now my son Derek is here tonight. And when he was real little, you know, about this big, I took him up to the top of the dunes. So this one has a special meaning for me. I don't know if you remember that or not. You don't remember it, yeah. It was a long time ago. This is the baseball coin. You may have seen this one. My sculpt on both of them, my design on the reverse. This is important because, for a number of reasons, it's the first curved coin that the United States Mint has ever produced. And I like it because it's not a political statement, it's art for art's sake, and when does the government do that? So yeah, I got to meet Brooks Robinson at that launch. That was pretty cool. He was my hero when I was a kid. I was a Baltimore Orioles fan. This is the gold version. You can see here with this slide how it's curved. And both the gold and both the obverse and the reverse. This won Coin of the Year this year. It won the big prize. I mean, let's go back. This won the prize for Coin of the Year for all the categories. Not all of them, but you know, they pick one coin from all the categories that they have winners in, and this one is the one that took home the prize this past year. Actually, it was the clad version, not the gold. It was considered the most innovative. This is the presidential dollar reverse. It's a common reverse. It's on all of the presidential dollars. It was my design. And this was President Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, that I had been working on this. I hadn't started working on the tablet yet. I was still drawing in pencil and paper, and I was working all day long on this, and it just wasn't working, and I thought, what the heck, let me give it a shot. So I started working on the Wacom. And for some reason, it was one of those days when everything just came real easy. It doesn't happen often. It doesn't happen enough. But it got chosen. And unfortunately, the photograph, I don't think, does it justice. But if it was lit properly, it would look better. Also, Harry Truman and John Kennedy. This coin got some criticism from one of the committees because they told me that American people do not want to see their president looking down. And the reason I did that was because he was under so much stress with the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis and everything that I just wanted to show some of the pressures that he was under. And I also wanted it to be reminiscent of Aaron Schickler's White House portrait where he's standing like this and he's looking down. So it's kind of reminiscent of that. This was for the American Veterans Disabled for Life. I had 6 feet up there when I started. And then I put the logo, they stood up for us, and all of a sudden it flashed into my head, take away a leg and add 2 crutches and it'll have more meaning. And I think this is one of the strongest statements, maybe not the strongest design I've ever done, but I think it's one of the strongest statements that I've made with coins. This one has a history. This was the reverse for the March of Dimes that was put out last year or 2 years ago. Again, I was racking my brain at work one day, couldn't come up with anything. And then it came into my mind. I called my daughter, who's a photographer. She takes wedding photos, as does my son, and she does children's photos. And she had Jack on her birthday. And her husband, John, came in and held Jack in his hand, and my daughter took a picture of him. And I used this as an inspiration for the March of Dimes coin. So it was really a family affair on this one. This is Mark Twain. You can see why I didn't go into spelling. But I put this in because the drawing that I worked from, it was not my design, but it was someone else. It was an outside artist, but it was very loose and spontaneous, and it really encouraged me to work that way when I was working in the clay. And I didn't finish it off as I normally would. I left it kind of loose, and I think it just kind of it works for me as far as spontaneity, and I think it kind of shows a little bit of his personality also. This was the obverse for the National Park Service gold coin, and we have Theodore Roosevelt, John Muir, and Half Dome. I also did the reverse. Both the obverse and reverse are my designs and sculpts. And the thing that I like about these, which really ties them together, is the figures kind of flow into the landscape. John Muir's beard actually merges with the landscape, and the National Park Service logo is superimposed over what could have been the actual mountain that it was taken from. So there's a direct link between the Park Service and the land itself, which I kind of liked. And a close-up of the obverse and one of the reverse. This is, Dolittle Raiders. Not my design, but I really like the sculpt. I like to do planes and boats and architecture. And this one just came out really well, I thought. This next one is Raoul Wallenberg. And he was, I'm sure you're aware that he saved thousands of Jewish people in Hungary during World War II. And he did that, one of the ways that he did that was he gave people these passes called Schutz Pass. So when someone was getting on the trains, the Nazis were putting the people on the trains to take them to the camps. He gave out these Schutz passes, which looked very official. So the prisoners showed them to the German soldiers, and they thought that they were official too, and they let them go. So that kind of worked out pretty well for them. But I think that they kind of blew it on this one. I like this design better because Wallenberg was kidnapped by the Soviets in 1945. So with the barbed wire, you don't know which side of the fence he's on. Is he saving the Jewish people, or is he imprisoned himself? And I like that aspect, but the Wallenberg family liked the other portrait better, so that's the one that got selected. But I would have gone with this one. And that's how the medal turned out. This one was done for the Code Talkers. There was a whole series that we did several years ago. There were, I think, 35 of them. One for each tribe that participated in both World War I and World War II as code talkers. And I just liked it because of its simplicity and the direct statement of the helmet and the feathers and the motif around the border. This was the first Congressional Gold that I had chosen back in 2004. Dr. Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King. I did it in 2004, but it wasn't given to the family until about 2014, I think it was, because they had some issues they had to work out. Oops, I didn't go that way. Yeah. Pope Francis. This was not for the mint. This was done for a private individual. That's the obverse. This was actually given to him when he came to Washington. And that's the reverse. On the left, you have St. Matthew's. The middle is the Basilica of the National Shrine. And on the right is, of course, the U.S. Capitol. This one took a lot of time also, just like the Brumidi did. I thought I'd never finish it because you have to get the perspective just right, because any little flaw, it'll show up. Suu Kyi, this was a gold medal that was given to her. She was under house arrest in Burma for the best part of 19 years and finally freed several years ago, and she wanted a peacock on the back, so I gave her one. This one I like a lot. I think this one turned out, and I think it's one of their best-selling ones, too. One for Shimon Peres, and one for George Bush. This was given for his second term, his second administration. We give out a presidential medal for each president for each administration, and this was the second one for him. It was not my design. Donna Weaver designed it, but I sculpted it. And I actually got to meet him in the Oval Office, and he was very cheerful, very cordial. I think he was just happy to be getting out of there, to tell you the truth. This was something that I had done back in 1982, Dance of the Dolphins. It was done for the Society of Medalists that Professor Scheidel mentioned. This won first prize at the 1985 Reliefs and Medals Show of the National Sculpture Society in New York. This is done for Brook Green Gardens in South Carolina. What it is you have to show the flora and fauna of South Carolina or the history. So I, of course, chose creepy crawlies because that's what I like to do. And you'll notice on the back the lettering was inspired by 1960s psychedelic posters because I'm a child of the 60s, you know. That's the chameleon that Professor Scheidel was talking about. It's a freestanding medal, about 4 or 5 inches high on this. I don't know if you call this the obverse, but he's checking out a fly. And if you turn him around, the other eye is looking straight up, so just like chameleons do. This is Crocodile Rock, done around the same time. It's around 1993 or so. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bird in the middle. I didn't know if it was a little, sorry about that, if it was a little comment on getting along or if it was just there. But I thought it gave a little extra dimension to it. It gave, you know, some thought. It's not just a nature sculpture. This was a design for the Monuments Men Reverse Congressional Gold Medal, and they were soldiers in World War II that tried to take back the artwork that the Nazis had stolen and hidden in salt mines and caves and whatnot. And they stole music, they stole literature, they stole paintings and sculpture, and they even stole a butterfly collection. So I added the butterfly because I think it gives it a whole, I don't know, kind of a whimsical feel for a very heavy subject. I'm a cyclist, and I decided to do a medal for cycling one day. This is the drawing of it. This is the finished plaster. And this is the medal, how it turned out. And there you have it. So if you want to have any questions right now, I can take questions and answers. Yes?
So Don, I notice on many, but not all, of the realizations of your designs, your initials are on one face or another. What about the ones that don't have your initials? I notice this one doesn't have your initials. Or at least I don't see
It has my name on it. Oh yeah, it's underneath the guy's leg on the left, yeah.
Okay, I see. Got it.
Yeah, I put my whole last name on that one.
And one of the medals had a serif W on it below the date. Is that?
Oh, that's the mint mark. That tells you it was minted in West Point.
Got it?
West Point is a W, San Francisco is an S, Philadelphia is a P, and Denver's a D. So that's, you can tell wherever it was minted by that.
West Point, the military academy?
Yes. Well, there's a mint in West
Didn't know
Point.
that.
And the military academy protects it. Also, the Fort Knox is part of the mint system also, and that's very well protected.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
You mentioned that you have different design. You provided design, but you didn't win, or they didn't select it. How many people at the Mint are designing the same thing?
We have a staff of 6 sculptors and designers at the United States Mint in Philadelphia. We are the only artists in the country that make these coins. And we're also augmented by about 15 or so AIP, or Artistic Infusion Program artists. These are outside artists that are mostly illustrators that provide designs to us, and then we work from them. It's a way to infuse some extra, different viewpoints and different styles and whatever. It's been a successful program.
When you're describing your process, you said occasionally the plaster pour will become full of bubbles. Does that ruin, obviously it ruins that pour, but does it ruin the clay underneath? And you have to start, how far back do you have to unwind the process?
If the bubbles were so bad that I couldn't use the plaster, I would go back and recast it. And I honestly can't tell you why it happens. Sometimes they're perfect, sometimes they're just unusable, and I do the same procedure every time. So, I don't know. It's one of those things. But generally, I would say, 95% of the time, I don't have any problems at all with the casting. Anyone else?
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of coins that came out of the federal operation. Are these coins for sale, or are they made specifically for the people who are honored?
The Congressional Gold medals?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're replicas. They're 3-inch bronze replicas. Also, the little one that was handed out is an 1.5-inch replica. But yes, you can buy them. If you go to the Mint website, you can buy them.
Really? Okay.
There's one other thing. I don't know why, but I didn't put my dinosaurs in here. I did a series of dinosaurs for the Society of Metalists back in the 90s. It started out with a T-Rex. I was flying to a metal conference in London, and I was reading Jurassic Park. So when I came back, I did this design with a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and they loved it. In fact, they liked it so much they asked for 5 more designs. So I did a whole series of designs. If you Google Society of Metalists, dinosaurs, you'll be able to see them. I don't know why I forgot them, but they really belong in here. Because they're actually, what it is you have on the front of the medal, they're not round. They're different cut-out, die-cut shapes, and on the front of it has the animal in its contemporary setting with animals that lived with it, and then when you turn it over, it's the fossil remains of that animal in a rock, like as if they were carved out, like a paleontologist would chip it out. So I actually did a lot of research on that. I went down to the Philadelphia Natural History Museum and worked with Ted Deschler, who's a very well-known paleontologist in the country, and tried, got everything as well right as I could. Now, if I could do them over, I would add feathers, because when I did these, they didn't know that dinosaurs had feathers. A lot of them did, particularly a lot of the theropods, and I would do them differently if I did them now.
Hi, I'm just curious, given that you do medals and coins, what the challenges and opportunities are for designing within a circular format always.
Well, to me, the hardest part of doing this whole process is to come up with an idea. Once I have the idea, it's easy to replicate it in 3 dimensions, because I've done well over 1,000 coins and medals in my career. So that's the easy part. The hard part is coming up with a design that works for me and tells the story of the narration for what I was tasked to do. Does that answer your question? Okay.
This one was instead of being flat, it was a disc. This one, instead of being flat, it was recessed and different on both sides. And I'm looking at some of the ancient coins that Jay brought with him tonight, and that was true of the old of some of the old Greek coins. But what was your inspiration for it? Did it have any connection with
you mean the
this?
dome? It's called a dome, the curve?
Yeah.
I think that the main reason, well, there's 2 reasons. One is aesthetically, and also it helps when you strike the coin for the metal flow. If it's shaped like that, it'll help bring up the relief better.
Yeah, well, I was thinking, the coins stack better that way too. Why don't people always make coins that way?
Yeah, well, some of them, we do a lot of things differently nowadays. We use digital technology and we create a unique basin. A basin is what we start out on, put the clay on. So we make a unique basin for each sculpt that we do now. Whereas in the past we had, this would be your commemorative basin, this would be your 3-inch metal basin. We make them all from scratch now because sometimes there's certain considerations that have to be taken into account as far as metal flow and relief, and the shape of the basin can aid in the striking and having the metal come up and fill. Sometimes they don't fill, so it looks like it wasn't finished. But all these things are part of the digital development department, and they know a lot more about it than I do.
With something, say, as the Congressional Gold medal that's available for purchase from various sources, I'm curious as to approximately how many copies are made, say, of a Congressional Gold medal.
I think it depends on how many they sell.
Okay.
Yeah. No, seriously, it does.
Well, is it more like 1,000 or 100,000?
I couldn't tell you that, but it's probably closer to 1,000 than it is to 100,000. Although that's probably low. It depends. Some of them are more popular than others.
So they sell it first, then they
No, we make it first, and if you go to the United States Mint website, you can see photos of everything, and then you can order from that. So we produce it first, and then the sales and marketing department tries to sell it.
And will you make more if they sell out?
Yeah. Well, they don't really sell out because there's not a limit on the medals. Now on commemoratives there are. We just did. I forget which one it was. We just did a coin that was limited to, I think it was 50,000, and they sold out in 6 minutes. Yeah. What was it? You remember which one that was, Heidi? That's what it was. It was a Standing Liberty. Yeah, and it sold out in 6 minutes. Oh, no, not Standing Liberty. It was the New Liberty that Justin Coons designed. Yeah. Justin Coons designed the obverse. Phoebe sculpted it. Paul Balin designed the reverse, and I sculpted it. It was an eagle. Yeah.
I think the Great Dunes is very interesting. Could you go into that a little more?
You were just a little guy at the time. And I held your hand, and we went up the dunes. They're 800 feet high, and then we flew down and rolled down them and everything. You don't remember any of that, do you? He was really cute when he was little. I don't know what happened to him.
Whose work do you most admire?
You mean medallic work?
Yeah, besides your own.
Well, St. Gaudens, of course, is the god of medallic sculpture. Barber. Who else do we have out there? Yeah, Weinman. He did really great sculpture. There's a lot of them that did really good things. If you could look through the Society of Medalists, it's like an all-star cast. Go to the Society of Medalists website, and you can see the dinosaurs, and you can see what's been done in the past. And it was really it's just too bad they don't make them anymore. I think they ran from 1930 to 1995. And interestingly enough, I was told that when I did the series of 6 of them, it killed the program because they had begun with only one. You could only enter once in your lifetime. You could only have one chosen. And then they changed the rules because they wanted me to do this dinosaur. And then they changed them again and had me do 5 more of them. And I think for some reason, whether it lost credibility or what it was, but the program was discontinued, which is a shame because there's some really nice medals in that series.
So I don't understand, when you do your original drawing, you do it at a fairly large scale. When do you reduce it down to coin size?
Well, it's reduced. That's a good question, actually. It's reduced after we do the sculpture. We normally work in about an 8-inch diameter, and then that plaster is scanned, photographically scanned, and the data is fed into a CNC machine, which reduces it and engraves into steel the relief. So I didn't really touch on that too much, but
So how was it done in ancient times?
well, up until when I first got there, they were using this contraption called a Janvier machine. It was a French Rube Goldberg type of thing with chains and sprockets, but they worked fine. They worked really well until the digital came along and kind of replaced it. We had, I think, 6 or 8 Janvier machines, and they're all in storage now, and they sold a bunch of them. But the new technology has taken over, and it's been an improvement. When we used to make changes, like say I did a design and they didn't like the shape of the wheel. Well, I'd have to go back into plaster and I have to cast it all over again. Now we just go in digitally. We have a photograph, or not a photo, but we have a render on our screen, the same screen that I used to design on. And I actually have a program called ZBrush. And I'll go in there and I'll just make a couple changes digitally with the stylus right on the screen. Presto, it's done. And we've saved like days and days of time. The technology of what? Well, they were I think, mostly struck. This gentleman could answer that better than I could.
Make a long story short, the dies were carved in bronze by hand, we believe without any magnification at size,
Right.
and then struck.
Mm-hmm. Did they cast any of them?
They were cast on.
They were. Probably the higher relief ones were cast.
The ugly ones mostly.
I also the advantage of the microphone here. You talked a little bit about the Wallenberg family having been involved in the design. How often did you interact with other people about the design and your work on it, and over what kind of period of time did these things take place?
I didn't personally interact with the family on this one, but we were given direction as far as what they wanted to see on it. There's very limited photo reference of him, and we can't really duplicate a photograph for legal reasons, for copyright reasons, so we have to kind of make a composite of them and make something that's original. But there wasn't a lot of interaction between us and them until they saw the designs that we had given them, and then they made their choices. Some of them are a lot more involved. Some people are a lot more involved than the Wallenbergs were. I know Jack Nicklaus was very involved in his. I know Nancy Reagan was very, very involved with not only her first spouse gold, but the Reagan presidential medal, coin rather. So yeah, it varies. It depends on the stakeholder. It's their call. Anything?
I'm fascinated by the Chameleon statue, isn't it?
It's about this big. It's bronze with a patina on it.
Cast?
Yes, it's cast.
How many were made?
I sold a bunch of them. I don't know how many I've sold, but talk to me and we can work something out.
That's what I wanted to hear.
No, that was a very popular one. At the time, I was trying to push the boundaries of what you call a medal, so I was making them freestanding and not round and with holes through them. And Heidi knows she does the same thing from time to time. Now, one thing I didn't cover too much, and I probably should, is the role that the committees play. Both the CFA, which is the Commission of Fine Arts, and the CCAC, or the Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee, both weigh in and they make recommendations on the sketches that we show them. We're not bound to go by those recommendations, but we take them very seriously, and they usually have a very, very large impact on the decision-making process. But we show them, and then from whatever their recommendations are, we'll huddle together at the Mint, and we'll select something based on, like CFA like this one, but the CCA, that was their second choice. So, we kind of work things, we try to, weigh those things and try and come up with what we think is the best design.
Don, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I want to talk with you about that today.
Thank you.
So we owe Don many kinds of thanks, but I think you got this medal in this white envelope. That's thanks to Don. We need to thank the folks at the U.S. Mint that let him come here. This is a very special talent. And really, I want to indicate to you now quite explicitly what's going on with the coins in the Cantor Art Center. But again, thanks to Don for this really inspirational and fascinating talk that begins to open the world of numismatics to those of us who have been peripherally involved. And I know that many of the folks here who are involved in numismatics are very pleased to see you, and obviously they know you very well. So thanks again. It was great, great stuff. So the postscript. Walter has set me up, and I love it. There are very productive conversations going on between the libraries and the Cantor Arts Center. We have had several very helpful conversations with the local numismatics friends who are assisting us in understanding how we have to care for and protect these coins and make them accessible for study and for teaching. We are well along in the process, and I am really quite confident that the coins will be joined here in the library with the Kovacs reference collection. When that exactly will happen, I think probably it's going to happen between now and next September. I think we're making good progress, provided we can do the facilities work swiftly once we understand what our responsibilities are. And once again, thank you to all of you from the numismatics collection friends who have been so helpful in this regard. And the fact that these coins have been so inspirational to the faculty and to their students is another marvelous indication of how we hope to be useful at Stanford. Thank you all very much for coming tonight.